I could see your worth in anybody's corporation and company. So that being said, Mike, I don't know how to start. I don't know how we want to start this. I don't want to go back to what you were talking about last week because there's questions in here about that that I've got. So what I want to do, maybe I'll ask some of these questions first because this segment has been added in, panel, for Mike to answer questions that have been coming in that you guys have been asking that we have not had the time to get Mike to answer these questions, and people have requested that we have another show that just has Mike answering questions on the things that he's given us and the things that we haven't had time to get answers on. So with that being said, let me see if the panel wants. Mike? This is your show, Mike. How you want to do this? You want to let the panel ask questions, or you want these questions that we have from outside? Because it's going to take some time. Your answers. Matter of fact, I'm going to turn this over to you, Mike.
Well, I don't really have a preference. I have not seen the questions that have come to you through chat and social media, so I don't have a way to prioritize them. Are there some common themes that have come up in these questions, or are they? They're
all basically on. I don't know. Some of them are questions from last week. Some of them are from before. Matter of fact, I'll just start. I'll go ahead and just give you some of these questions that came in and who sent them in. This is Aaron. Aaron, if you're out there, thank you for your questions and your participation. And we welcome you. We thank you for being a part of Let Your Voice Be Heard Talk Radio. Aaron from Fort Myers, Florida.
Okay.
He said, what is the greatest leadership challenge organizations face today?
Probably the greatest challenge is finding people who are willing to pay the price to really be excellent leaders in upper, middle, and top level positions. Mm-hmm. Because it is an exhausting task. The role of leadership has expanded so much in the last 30 or 40 years. The constituencies that you have to deal with, the regulatory environment that you have to live within, the polarization that feeds into the attitudes that you are subjected to from critics, from upset customers, the whole world of litigation against companies. There are so many things going on now that leadership is a demanding task. And what we're finding is that many, many people would like to have the financial rewards of higher leadership positions, but they don't want the headaches, the time it takes, the imposition on their family that they have to make in order to fulfill the duties. And so that succession, where do we find our next generation of leaders, is one of the biggest problems. At the lower level, for entry-level leaders, the biggest problem is that here in the United States, not necessarily true in other parts of the world, but here in the United States, our educational system has let us down in the last 30 to 40 years in that we are not producing graduates from high schools and even from universities in many, many cases who are really good critical thinkers, who can take a problem and really analyze it with something other than their gut reaction and their emotional response to it. How to reason through evidence and weigh evidence and determine how that should factor into decisions you make. And I never dreamed when I began this, my business 26 years ago, that people would be hiring me to teach young executives how to think critically. But that is part of the world that we function in as executive coaches right now, is helping people who are new in management develop their potential to go to the top, because they are going to have to think critically in order for companies to entrust them with large-scale responsibilities.
Wow. Thank you for that. I hope that answered your question, Aaron, because I definitely got an answer to that. I'm asking questions here, but I see Karen's hand is up. She's anxious. I gotta let you go, man. Come on. Mm-hmm. Let your voice be heard. You gotta unmute so we can hear you.
Okay. I was waiting to get my question in before you started with everybody else's question, because then my question might have been somebody else's question and it's my question. Okay, so yes, Mike, I've been listening to all of your shows, and I know you've been in the military, you dealt with the church, the C-suite, and all of those things. And I have so many great, awesome takeaways that I and others can implement into their leadership role, which I want to thank you for. But my question for you is, of all the leadership principles and techniques that you have taught, which one has had the greatest influence on your own success as a leader? Not everybody else's, your own success.
Wow.
I think it was the influence of mentors early on who instilled in me, without ever using the word, the importance of being a lifelong learner. Because the name of the game in leadership, executive leadership especially today, is the learning curve never stops. It gets steeper and steeper and steeper. And I remember when I was 26 or 27 years old, I was working as an associate minister for a large church. I had a real good friend who was a minister for another church nearby. People loved him. He was with that church at that point 22, 23 years, would eventually serve them for nearly 35. But everybody loved him, but they hated his sermons. They said he is so dull. He is so difficult to listen to. And I couldn't figure it out, because he was a life of the party kind of guy, a fun person to be around. We ran youth camps together, and I loved doing a camp with him in the summers. He was so much fun. But the first time he came into my office then, after we had known each other for a couple of years, he walked in and he looked at my library, which then only had probably 400 or 500 books in it. Today it has 3,000. But he looked at those 400 or 500 books, and he just stopped and said, "I cannot believe that you have spent this much money at your age on books. I could not wait to get out of college so I would never have to read another one." And suddenly I understood why Jack was a dull boy. He had not read anything that had stretched him in a long time. So I am a firm believer that we need to read widely, wisely, and well. We need to read widely outside of our own discipline, because we're going to run into ideas outside our discipline that cross-feed into our discipline and give us perspectives that we would have not had otherwise. People, are always asking me, where do all these different perspectives you have come from? It usually comes from experiences elsewhere that have nothing to do with what I'm being asked to talk on at the moment, but it cross-fertilizes into the challenge that the present conversation faces. So read widely, read wisely. I had a graduate professor whose office was next door to mine. I was a teaching fellow in their program. And he would walk into my office and open up my book, my briefcase, and start pulling books out of it that I had checked out of the library. And he would say, "How far are you into this book?" "Well, 50 pages. Have you read anything that really shook you up?" "No." You read anything that you had to read 3 or 4 times to be sure you understood it?" "No." "Have you read anything that's forced you to rethink your whole approach to life?" "No." And he would slam the book shut, put it under his arm. I'd say, "What you doing with my book?" He said, "I'm going to take it back to the library and check it in for you." I said, Why? And you say, there are 1 million books in that library. You can't read all of them in your lifetime, and you've just wasted a week of your time on a book that did not stretch you or change you in any way whatsoever. Okay. And so that was one part of it, be reading that challenges you. But then the other part was read authors who are really good, learn what good writing is. And that's one of the things that's really missing today in the education of young executives. They have never been in situations where they were immersed in the way that good writers write. And so they are not particularly effective at writing themselves. So read widely, wisely, and well. Read things that will stretch your thinking, are properly chosen because they will help you grow, and things that are from people who can teach you how to read well. That's probably been the most important lesson for me in terms of my own personal leadership and effectiveness in all aspects of my life.
Wow. You're muted. You're muted, Karen. Okay, now you're muted, and you muted your face and everything. You are you're a regular panel member here.
Okay, this is my last question. Wow. I promise this is my last question. I promise. Last week, or when the last time you was on the show, you gave an author and a book, and I couldn't find it for the life of me, and I wanted this book. It was the how and the why, and it was the author was some that you said that everyone needs to read this book, and I can't remember it.
Okay, the author is Viktor Frankl, Viktor. Frankl is Frankl. KL. Mm-hmm. His book.
And the title?
His book is Man's Search for Meaning. It's available in several different editions that you can find, still widely read. I actually had the privilege of being in the audience when he spoke at SMU, which is just a short distance from me here, when he was 93 years old. And it was one of the most masterful presentations I've ever heard. Spoke without notes for 2.5 hours on a sweeping survey of modern psychiatry and psychology and the curves and detours that it has taken and where we are today. Brilliant man. But the book itself is an easy read, but a life-changing read.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. Thank you, Karen, for your questions. Let's see. Before I go back to what's been pouring in, since our panelist, Sister Karen, has opened the panel floor, I'm going to go to the chat, and I see there's something here. It says, if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring leaders, what would it be and why?
First of all, the two most important qualities for you to really anchor in your life, if you're going to be in tough leadership positions, is first courage and second humility. Do a gut check on where you are on courage and humility. The worst decisions I've ever made as a leader was recommending someone as a successor whose courage I questioned, and it turned out that I should have been more skeptical and questioned stronger, because they wrecked something I had spent quite a bit of my time in life getting up and going, because when the tough going arrived, they did not have the courage to take the tough stand that was called for. The humility, because you've got to always be learning. Coming back to that, be a lifelong learner. You've got to be able to do that. So that's what I first start with. Myself, in my character, have I really developed the courage and the humility that will serve me well in leadership going forward? The second thing that I would say goes back to something that I addressed in one of our very first conversations. And it is the advice that was given me by the man who was the longest mentor in my life, not a formal mentoring relationship. He just took me under wing when I was 28, and until his death just a few years ago, he continued to be a voice that I enjoyed hearing, because there was always a lot of wisdom in what he had to say. But the thing that he said to me dozens and dozens of times, and now I say over and over to my own clients, we all have a flat side on our wheel somewhere. There are things we are good at, and there are things we are not good at. Many people, when they realize they're not good at something, they start spending their time trying to round out that side of their wheel. That's not the best strategy, because there are some things I will never be well-rounded at in my life, no matter how hard I try. I'm better advised to use my energy elsewhere. And where is that elsewhere? His statement was, we all have a flat side on our wheel. The sooner we recognize that flat side, there's the humility. Recognize what I'm not particularly effective at, even though I might like to be, might like to think of myself as being. My track record says I'm not real good at that. The sooner we recognize the flat side of our wheel and build people and systems around us to compensate for it, the sooner we will be successful, and the more successful we will be. Now, I don't mind repeating that again in this podcast, having said it once in another one, because I think it's the most profound piece of advice I've ever heard anyone give a leader. Figure out what the flat side of your wheel is, and then build people and systems around you to compensate for that. So let me show you how that plays out in my life. I didn't elaborate on that when we talked about it earlier. I discovered early on that I am captivated by the challenge of solving a tenacious problem. I love to dig in and peel back the layers of that onion and find out what's going on underneath what's going on. And the more thorny the problem, sometimes the more energetic I am in getting into it, because I just love solving the problem, particularly strategic problems. But then I have to implement the solution. The flat side of my wheel is the implementation. And the reason is I get my fulfillment from solving the problem. Other people get their fulfillment from implementing the solution. When I go to implement the solution, I start off with good intention and a lot of focus and energy. But what happens fairly quickly is, out of the corner of my eye, I see this other problem over here that's begging for a solution. And I say, man, when I get this implementation finished, I'm going to go look at that. That needs to be done. But I've got to work on this problem right now. I've got to implement this. But then about 10 minutes later, I'm looking at that problem again. And before long, I'm trying to drive this vehicle while looking out the side window. And we know what happens if we drive a car like that. Before long, I'm off pursuing that problem and its solution rather than sticking with the implementation that I was committed to. So whenever I was able to do it, once I came to face that about myself, whenever I was able to do it, I chose my second in command, my number two person, to be someone who loved implementation, had the maturity to approach me and the courage to approach me and say, boss, the wheels are about to come off because you're not paying enough attention to the implementation. You've got to get back on focus here, and hold me to account for the thing that I was not good at. Even though they were doing most of it, there were things that I had to have input on, and I had to have timely input, and I had to have informed input. They would hold me to that task. And so that's the way that it played out for me. And I have been blessed to have beside me some number two people. Couldn't always do it in the Navy because the Navy often assigned my number two person. But elsewhere, I've had beside me some number two people who were not particularly inventive or innovative or visionary as on their own, but they could recognize a vision or a strategic objective that was really valuable and figure out how to go make it happen. Those have been the people whose contributions to what I was doing accounted for my success much more than my own creativity in solving the problem.
Thank you for that, Mike. Wow. And that same person asked, are you going to write another book?
As a matter of fact, I'm in the midst of one right now. I don't know when it will see the light of day, but
Okay.
I'm working with the idea that what we have to do to build strong organizations that have the agility, speed, and innovation to stand up to the change that's coming at us at breakneck speed now, especially with the added impetus that AI is developing. They have to be organizations that are totally congruent. That is, their values are congruent. The way that they relate to one another personally within the organization has to be congruent. That congruence is, and this is a term that I'm trademarking, a congruence. Talking about a congruence accelerator. Our problem is our organizations tend to be trying to go in too many different directions, led by too many different parties who have a strong voice or a strong opinion, instead of being aligned like a laser and being focused. The more congruent we can be, the faster we can be, the more adaptive we can be, the more innovative we will prove to be. And so I've coined this term, the congruence accelerator. Congruence accelerates the speed at which we can get done the things that the world is throwing at us today. So that's the next book that's in the works, and I've got maybe 20% of it finished, and a lot of it still bouncing around up here.
I'm sure it's going to be awesome. We're waiting for it. Now, here's another question here. Says, which I probably could answer this for you. Says, are you happy with the career you ended up in? I probably could answer that one.
I assume that I am. Yeah, I have. One of the ways that my life has been blessed is that I've never had a job that I didn't really enjoy. And this work that I'm doing right now with leaders across the profit and nonprofit spectrum, from entry-level leaders to C-suite and board member executives, it just punches so many of my buttons that I wake up every day and say, "Hey, how could I have fallen into this? This is a lot of fun."
I was going to answer the same way, Mike. I was verbatim. I was going to say the same thing for you. Thank you for that, Mike. Rita says, I've only joined a couple of shows, but I have gained insight on being a leader. I have to thank you for sharing your experience. I would see and to hear your inspirational messages on a weekly basis. Wow.
Well,
thank you, Rita.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, if you guys have questions, you guys just raise your hand. I'll get to you. Yeah, we'll get to some more of these questions here that came in, Mike. Pamela Dyson from Long Island, New York. She says, how do you lead confidently during times of so much uncertainty?
One of the things that I did not mention in the question about what does it take to be a leader today is that a capability that we need to develop early on, especially if we have aspirations or ambitions to ever go to top leadership in a business or a corporation of any significant size, one of the abilities we have to develop is the confidence to make decisions when there's a lot of ambiguity in the details. What happens as we move up the leadership ladder in corporate America or in government or in the military or any enterprise for that matter, large organizations? When we start at the bottom, most of the decisions we have to make are rather near term in focus. They are 30 days, 3 months out, maybe a year for budgeting purposes. But we're dealing with time frames that are somewhat constrained, and therefore we've got a lot of current data that informs our decisions. And so if we make a decision and someone challenges it, it's easy for us to defend ourselves by citing the data that we used. But as we move up the corporate ladder, the time horizon for our decisions starts getting longer and longer and longer. So that by the time we get to the C-suite, the time frame for many of our most critical decisions is 5, 7, 9, 11, 15 years out. I had one executive who was making decisions that had a 30-year span that he had to take into consideration because he was designing aircraft for aircraft carriers that would not be built for another 20 years.
Wow.
He had to think about where naval aviation would be and where naval architecture for carriers would be in 20 years, and then be sure that the aircraft and the ship frame were going to be able to function together. Now, think of how much ambiguity is in that decision making. You're having to go on a lot of things other than hard data. Well, that begins to happen just short of the C-suite tier, but it's big time in the C-suite tier. And there are a lot of people who are capable and confident and competent at making decisions as long as they have the data, but they become intimidated when they have to start making decisions where there's a lot of ambiguity and they can no longer defend it with the data. They have to defend it with their own instincts and why they trust those instincts and why others should trust the instincts that they're speaking from. So the question about how you deal confidently with there's so much uncertainty is you start preparing for it early on, because you have to be prepared for the fact that the higher you rise, the longer the time horizon for your decisions, the greater the ambiguity, and therefore the more uncertainty that's going to be in them. But the other thing is, going back to one of our earlier episodes, the way you deal with uncertainty is to be crystal clear on your core values. And what I mean by core values, those values that are not going to change no matter what. We may change product lines. We may change industries. We may change the nature of our structure. We may shift, as one of my clients has done recently, from a nonprofit to a for-profit status. But no matter what our configuration, I'm going to be true to these values, and I'm going to build an organization that has its own clear sense of appropriate values, core values that we hold to just as determinedly. Now, with those values, when the uncertainty comes along, I've got to make a decision within that uncertainty, and I don't have necessarily a clear vision as to what I should do. I don't have trend lines that I can count on that tell me what I ought to do, but I do have those values. And if I've done what I talked about earlier of being widely read and with a lot of understanding of the bigger picture of what's happening in the world around me, within that bigger picture and within the parameters of those values, I can make good decisions that will probably turn out okay. They may not be the absolutely best decision I could have made had I had more information or more details, but they will be good decisions. They won't be decisions that are going to take us down. Now, some place that we've been dealing with this now for some time is in military field operations. Because I was in the intelligence world, we were able in the intelligence world 30 and 40 years ago to give a field commander so much more data from sensors we had overhead and underwater and everywhere else, that they were completely inundated with data. They have to make decisions in real time to maintain momentum on the battlefield. And leaders on the field were beginning to be overwhelmed by the amount of data they had. This really happened for the first time in the Kuwait-Iraq War. And what we finally came up with was what is sometimes called a 70% formula. Sometimes you'll hear it used as an 80% formula. And the basic rule of thumb was, if you looked at, let's take 70% of what you think would probably be the most relevant intelligence, and you've done about 70% of the analysis of that you think that you should do, and you've got a 70% confidence that the course of action that you've been thinking about is the course to take, act. Because you're not likely to do something that is completely wrong, but acting is more important in maintaining momentum on the battlefield than getting all the data right. Well, that rule of thumb is now being increasingly used in the corporate world. You deal with uncertainty by saying, what are the most valuable sources of information that I should consult in making this decision? Have I looked at a good enough sample of those that I know the general sense of the best thinkers in this field? And in that regard, now, am I 70% confident that I know the right thing to do? Act on it. Because your people will start getting demoralized and discouraged if you keep putting off decisions that they feel need to be made in order for them to know what direction they should be going and what they should be contributing to the direction that the organization is going. So don't delay, study, but study with a plan, and you have a sense that 70% confidence, 80% confidence, I'm going to act because I will never get to 100% certainty in time to avoid losing this opportunity.
Wow, that's a lot. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you, Pamela Dyson, for that question. I hope that answered your question.
I have a question.
Oh, just put your hand up. I got you. Just put your hand up. Come on. Come on. Come on, Bernadette.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
Let your voice be heard.
Okay. So I really like everything that Dr. Mike's teaching us about. And I wondered with leadership, how important is it to involve the friends that you have like around you? How important is it to be careful with the type of friends you pick? Or is it okay to make a friend with everybody you meet? Does that have any influence on being a good leader?
I would want to know how you are defining friend.
People that you spend time with, talk to, eat meals with, maybe see on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, people around you that know about your life.
Okay. Most successful leaders have their friendship circle completely outside their organizational circle. And there's a reason for this. Once you step into the C-suite, and especially once you step into the CEO's role, people read into everything you say, everything you do, every person you speak to, some meaning. So much hinges on your decisions, your approval, your direction setting, your decision making, that everyone in the organization is super attuned to what you're doing. And most people in leadership discover very quickly that if the organization is very large, they have to be very careful about seeming to socialize with certain people in the organization. Because the next time they have to make a tough decision that somehow impacts that person they socialize with, if they make it for that person, then people will think it's a political decision. If they make it against that decision, that person, they endanger the relationship. I'm your friend. Why didn't you choose me for that assignment? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So the politics of working within a large corporate setting means, yes, you need friends. You need professional colleagues. There's a difference between a professional colleague and a friend that you socialize or vacation with.
Okay.
Okay. Those need to be discriminately separated. And the rare occasions on which I have not done that, it has been with friends who understood leadership well enough that they understood coming in that our past friendship didn't mean that I was necessarily going to go with their decision. For instance, I had a former commanding officer who went to work for me as a vice president when I was president of the college. Okay, so here I'm managing someone who used to be my commanding officer.
Wow.
So people knew we had a close professional relationship outside of the campus. But he also understood that if I said no to something he wanted to do, it was nothing personal. It was my best judgment, and he respected me enough that would stand. So we had some leeway in that relationship I would not have in most. There is a reason why we have the expression lonely at the top.
Lonely at the top.
Right. Because once you get at the top of complex organizations, there's no one in the organization you can talk to about the things that are worrying you or bothering you or concerning you the most. Because one of the things you soon learn is the people down in the ranks like to be known among their friends as the person who's got a confidential relationship with the president or the CEO. And no matter how much they tell you that they'll keep things you share confidently, they don't. There's one person it will be okay to tell it to. These people will be discreet with it. No, you soon learn that will not play out that way because their ego is caught up in being the buddy to the leader. And so when I was early in my presidency, struggling with the loneliness of it, in a town that was new to me, so I didn't have friends in the community. My acquaintances were all associated there on the campus. And so I was feeling that intensity of loneliness, but thought of it as being somewhat my own struggle. But then I went to a conference that was made up of 18 university and college presidents and chancellors. It was chaired by a good friend of mine who was president of a liberal arts college here in Texas. And we met just for 3 days, just to have a time that we could share with one another ideas or thoughts for doing our jobs better as college presidents. In the course of it, my friend who was emceeing the meeting, facilitating it, said, let me do something. This isn't planned. I want you to take out a piece of paper, and I want you to write on that piece of paper the 3 greatest personal challenges that you deal with in your personal life as a college president. Don't put your name on it. This is not a survey we're going to distribute. I just want to see where we all are. So 18 of us filled out our form, turned them in. I put loneliness as my number 2 issue. I was the only person who put it as number 2 because 17 people put it as number 1. That's when I realized that this statement, lonely at the top, was not just something I was feeling. Leaders at the top know it firsthand. One of the books I started to write years ago, never did get around to it, was a book that would be called Lonely at the Top, that would be built on interviews with top leaders in many different fields who would share how they dealt with this phenomenon. And my goal was to do that and then to come back with a second book that was based on interviews with their spouses that would be called Lonely at the Side. Because what I came to realize is that my loneliness translated into my wife's loneliness.
Wow.
Because there was so much I could not share with her, and she knew it. And so she felt like she was an outsider in many of the things that I was struggling with the most. So it's not just lonely at the top for a leader. It's lonely at the leader side.
Wow.
I would read that book.
we waiting on a few books from you, Mike. we waiting on those books, man.
Thanks for answering my question so thoroughly. That makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad I got to hear it straight from you. Thank you so much. You can mute me. I don't know how to mute it.
Thank you for the question, Bernadette. For the sake of time, it's still a bunch of questions I got here. Let's see. We have Steve Folan from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mm-hmm. He says, I've heard you speak about company values before vision. So how do you create and communicate a compelling vision that inspires others?
There are a variety of ways that you can do it. First of all, you have to decide which type of vision you're going to build your branding and your communication around. The two type of visions are what I call aspirational visions. This is what we want to do out in the distant future. It is John F. Kennedy saying, within this decade, we will send a man to the moon and bring him back safely to Earth. Okay. At the time he said that, almost 90% of the technology we had to have to do it had not been invented. But that vision was so captivating to the American public in 1960-61 that in 10 years we did send men to the moon and bring them back safely to Earth. We invented what had to be done to make it happen. And it was one of the greatest moments in human history to see that first step on the moon. So that's one kind of vision. This is what we aspire to do. Other visions are a vision of what we want to be known for, what kind of company we want to be known for. And those are two different kinds of visions, but they're both equally motivational if they're couched in the right way. And the way that we then work with that is that keep in mind that a vision in its own right doesn't do much for us. It's just a nice sounding statement. Where visions have their power is when people get excited about the vision and move to make that vision a reality. How does that happen? That happens when a leader connects the vision to the values of his or her people. That is the motivational challenge wherever we find ourselves needing to motivate people. We have to connect their values to our vision, which means we've got to be focused on what are the things that they value that I can connect this vision to. Show them how that by achieving this vision, they get the benefit of seeing that value that they have fulfilled. And so in developing a vision that is compelling, there needs to be a lot of dialogue with your people about ideas that could be our vision. Where would you find excitement if we were to go in a given direction or if we were to undertake certain priorities? So there's got to be a lot of dialogue. Once the vision is established, the second thing is always talk about it. If you're not talked about your vision so much that people are saying you talk about it too much, you haven't talked about it enough. Your test is, have I talked enough about my vision? Well, how many people have complained that I've talked about it too much? If I'm not getting any complaints like that, I haven't talked about it enough. Because vision fades, just like our eyesight. As we age, the eyesight gets dimmer. As vision ages, it begins to get more and more blurred. We've got to keep calling people back to it because it's the direction we're going. It's the distant marker we're keeping our eye on. And one of the things we do is we tie commendations in the organization. When we commend a person for something the individual has done, or a team for what it has done, or a division for what it has accomplished, we always say that's the kind of thing we've got to have more of in order to accomplish this aspect of the vision. And so we keep the vision alive, and we tell lots of stories about people in our organization that have caught the vision and the things they have done to advance the vision. We use storytelling in order to keep the vision before our people. Those are just some of the things that we do to help that vision live on beyond the initial announcement of it.
Thank you so much, Steve Folan. We thank you for that question and hope that you got your answer. There's so many questions here, man, and I'm looking at the time, but I'm going to pick what I like. There's one thing I want to ask for the time. I said, I know that. Let me ask it anyway. It says, what book has most influenced your leadership philosophy? Now, it better be the book I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Come on, Mike.
There's no doubt that people who hear me talk realize that my value structures and my understanding of how the human being should function as an individual, as a family, as a society, are very much aligned with biblical values and biblical perspectives. That has been the most important book for me overall. And yet, there are so many things that the Bible, to fulfill its purpose, doesn't really address that are leadership issues. For instance, and you've run into this in ministry, many of the issues that are brought to us as ministers are not issues that the Bible has any guidance on. An example, I became one of the early therapists in the field of multiple personality disorder. I ended up going to Europe and being on panels that taught therapists in Europe how to deal with multiple personality disorder. That happened because we had people in our congregation who were illegal immigrants at a time when that was really a consequential thing in our society, who came to me for counseling. They could not go to a public counselor because they could not reveal their status, and without revealing their status, they couldn't get any help. And as a result, they would come to me, and I had no idea what this was that was sitting in front of me, but it was different. And so I began to work with these people just to try to understand what was going on, and eventually became a support therapist for clinics that really worked with this kind of disorder. Well, there's nothing in the Bible that's going to help me as a minister deal with multiple personality disorder other than just a commitment to be compassionate and listen well and pray and work well with people. There are equivalents in leadership. There are many aspects of leadership that the Bible is silent on. So it can't be the only guide, but it is certainly a central anchor in the way that I view the world and what I believe about people and about their possibility and potential.
Thank you so much, man. I said I know what book. I know the book he's got to say. I was going to say it for you, and I hope that answered your question. That was from Greg Rosie in Tampa, Florida. Okay, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Let me see here. Okay, this is Joe G from Memphis, Tennessee. He says, "How do you recognize when it's time to pivot your strategy?"
That's a question that's being asked more and more because we're realizing the importance of the pivot. the question is, what is going to be my metric that tells me that I need to pivot? My brother, who is a very successful CPA and has put together some very big companies, I one time asked him, given the fee you charge people to put together partnerships and corporate documents, what is the most important service you provide for them? And he said, well, I don't know, but I can tell you what I get comments about more often years later than anything else. And he said, that is, after all the documents are drawn up, I lay the documents in front of the client for them to be ready to sign. I put a pen there and I say, now, before you pick up that pen, I want you to tell me this. How will you know that this is not working out? And how will you then react? What will you do when it doesn't work? And he said, if they can't answer those two questions, they're not ready to sign that document. Well, that's a good question for any of us. How will I know that my strategy is not working? And what options will I have, in my pocket that I can pull out as an alternative way to go at things? And so you've got to pay attention to the results. The best sounding strategy that's not getting results is a strategy that you need to get away from. The best marketing campaign that's not bringing in clients is a campaign you need to scrap. You've got to be results driven. The results will tell you whether the strategy is working or not. And if the results are not giving you what you expected, then it's time either to revise or abandon that strategy. And I know of no other way to answer that question other than occasionally you deal with people who just have such a strong gut. They've got so much experience. They've got such a strong sixth sense that they can sometimes instinctively know it's time to change, but they can't put words to it. But their success tells you you should listen when they say, my gut tells me we've run the course on this approach, on this strategy.
What about Mike? And it's just me talking now.
Yeah.
What about off of what I know because I'm off, because the vision is off?
Yes.
I'm offline with my vision.
Yes. That's a vital question for us to ask. Was the vision correct to begin with? Is that why I'm not aligned with it? Because my values, my instincts, my experience are moving me in a different direction. Does the vision need to be revised or replaced? Or what is it that is alluring me away from it? What are the values that are being served by something else that the vision is not satisfying? And why are those things so valuable to me that they would cause me to drift away from the vision that is so central to what I set out to do? In that kind of setting, as I'm trying to determine whether or not the vision should be set aside, we need to realize that visions are designed to be achieved and replaced. Microsoft's original vision was a computer on every desktop. Well, about the end of the 1990s, the early 2000s, they woke up one day to a world in which there was a computer on every desktop. Now, what's your vision? And quite honestly, Microsoft spent ages trying to figure out what the vision was. They've gone through several iterations of it. And now the vision, I'm not quoting the vision, but this is fundamentally what it is: a world in which any device can talk to any device. Now, you think about what you're seeing in the world. That is the world we're building, a world in which any device can talk to any device. Wow. That's their vision. So visions are made to be replaced. Sometimes they run their course for reasons other than the fact we fulfilled them. They just became outdated or outmoded because the realities of the culture and the environment that we're operating in changed so much that they no longer were the vision we needed.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mike. Mike, we love you, man. Man, listen, there's so many more questions here. We might have to do this again because I really enjoyed this. I got a lot out of this stuff for this. There's maybe 30 more questions I'm looking at here. We may have to do this again. We love you here, Mike, and on Let Your Voice Be Heard Talk Radio. You are probably more than likely one of our favorite guests. We want to see you back again, man. My panel, I love you guys, man. You guys keep coming, man. You keep getting this valuable information, man. We have awesome people on Let Your Voice Be Heard. So you guys keep coming.
Step in, lean in, mic on, and begin. Hey! Been quiet too long, chewed up tongue. Turn down songs, clock keeps ticking on the wall. But your name's still missing from the roll call. Let your voice be heard, say every single word. From the low notes to the sky, throw hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you. Got a truth tucked deep in your chest, heartbeat tapping out, say it, confess. Crowd might stare, let them do what they do. They never held a fire living in you. Let your voice be heard, say every single word. From the low notes to the sky, throw your hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you. Name your dream out loud. Stand up, you're the leader of this crowd. One spark, one shout, watch the silence melt. That power in your mouth is the truest thing you felt. Let your voice be heard, say every single word. From the low notes to the sky, throw your hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you. Yeah, that's you. That's you. Step in, lean in, mic off. Never again.